All right. And I'll just start this training with a couple of words, two things. One, success without fulfillment is failure. That is true. So no matter what you're working on, if you are not feeling like, look, so I'll do a little bit of a humble brag here. Like, I've got lots of accolades. I have been lauded and applauded and patted on the back by bigwigs all the way up to the Department of the Defense and the State Department. Like, I have stuff that has altered international relations on between like the International Red Cross and the International Committee of the Red Cross and the DOD because of all the stuff down in Guantanamo Bay and all that kind of things, And so when people see my resume, most people are like, I don't believe it, it's fake. That's happened to me multiple times, okay? Now, here's the funny thing. While a lot of people will read it and they're like, dang, that's pretty awesome. From a fulfillment standpoint, it does absolutely nothing for me. And because of that, I got really sad and depressed late in my military career because I started questioning why I was doing anything I was doing. You know what I mean? And so that phrase that from Tony, success without fulfillment is failure, really resonates with me. Because here's the deal. On this end, you could be a multi-billionaire who owns a bunch of different companies and is altering the landscape of the world as we know it and be quote unquote successful. You could also be a beach bum who does nothing but get up in the morning every day to watch an amazing sunset, walk across the beach, to watch the amazing sunrise in the morning. And that's all they do for their entire life. But if that's what they love to do, then who am I to tell them that they are not successful? Right. And so this is the challenge the conundrum that I'm trying to deal with. Okay. Right. And so, and then the second thing is, if that is true, then fulfillment really is a state of being. It is an emotional state that we find ourselves in. And when you come to understand that at the end of the day, the individual gets to control how you feel about things, you're really in a position of power, because no matter what's going on in the outside world, you can take the time to recognize that, hey, if I want to feel fulfilled, I have had moments in my life where it was very fulfilling for me. My son getting through his brain surgery and not ever having a seizure ever again, super fulfilling, right? Like those kind of moments. Well, I want to be cognizant and aware of those kind of moments and make sure that they are prevalent in my life, both now and in the future, and in my remembrance when I go back to the past. Does that make sense?
Perfect sense.
So, right. And so I want you to understand that, because that kind of contextualizes the way that my life system is set up, this flexible life optimization success system that we're about to go over. Cool. All right, here we go. So let's share my screen. Let me know if you guys can see my screen. Also, I should get a pop-up that's saying that someone's in the waiting room. If something comes up like that and I don't see it, please let me know, and I'll be sure to let them in. Okay.
Sounds good. We can see your screen.
Okay, so let's start off right here. All right, so here's the deal. So this bad boy right here is kind of an infographic for a simplification of the way my life is structured. All right, as you can see, we got this cool pine tree or a Christmas tree, whatever you want to call it. And so I operate from the premise that everything that I do in my life is surrounded by this ultimate outcome. Okay, so all my tasks lead up to goals. All my goals lead up to outcomes. All my outcomes lead up to areas of responsibility. All my areas of responsibility leads up to theaters of life. And all my theaters of life lead up to an ultimate outcome. Does this make sense conceptually?
Yes.
Yes.
Right?
I'm assuming you're going to clarify what theaters of life mean, right?
We're gonna go over all that stuff. Yes.
Perfect.
All right. But this is just a quick infographic to show you what I'm talking about in terms of how all this stuff works. Okay. And this also is this idea of chunking, right? This is my big overarching, hairy, audacious outcome. But in order to do that, this means it encompasses my entire life. Well, life is too big, so I got to break it down into smaller parts. And I'll tell you what, we're going to come over here and we're going to go with this little graphic that I created. Okay. And so these are my organizing principles for FLOSS. Okay. So when I first thought about my life, life is this big, hugey, messy, amorphous, fuzzy, foggy idea, right? And the challenge with it is it creates a lack of clarity in your life. And I'm going to argue or make the submission or make the claim that the reason why most people are in a bad mood or dealing with anxiety or doing or finding themselves in a negative state of mind and emotion is because they have a lack of clarity in their life, which means that they have not taken the time to clarify and organize or get clear about their life. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay. And so this ultimate outcome that we were talking about over here, that applies to my life. And you're going to see this here in a little bit. I actually have this big, long written out diatribe about what my ultimate outcome is. And I'll show you that when we go through the planning section, like through my daily planner. But I just want to show you these concepts. Okay. So now that I know that that's life, we need to make it a little bit cleaner. Okay. And so we're going to go from this big amorphous messiness of life, and we're going to divide life into, now there's this concept of
I thought
mental
you said
construct.
was on the table.
Oh. Hey, Deb, can I get you to mute?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, I'm done.
Oh, okay. All right. So now we're going to come down into, well, what I want to do is I want to take life, this big pie of life, if you will, and I want to break it down into three, right? There's this mental model called the power of three. In fact, the number three it's been associated with the magical and the spiritual, right? And the other realm for probably since the dawn of time. And I like to use it as a way of breaking down big, giant, complex ideas and subjects and concepts into more manageable parts. Fair? Okay. And so I take life and I break it down into these big theaters of life. Now in the military, you have big theaters, right? The PACAF, the Asian theater, the European theater, the continental US theater. And all theater means is just a large swath of an area. So that's why I call them theaters of life, TOLs. And so I sat down one day and I meditated and I put a lot of thought in this. I said, is it possible to break down life, my life, into three parts that encapsulates everything? And this was the answer I came up with, right? The internal, the external, and the economic. All right. And so the internal deals with the self, okay? And then the external deals with all of the externalities of life. And the economic is, I look at economic as kind of like the lube, the oil, the lubrication that goes in between the external and the internal. Because what a lot of people don't understand about money in economics is the reason why money matters is because back in the day, if I wanted to buy something from Sue and money didn't exist, we'd have to barter, right? I'd have to say, hey, Sue, I'm going to give you my sofa, but in exchange, I want your dining room table. And say Sue didn't want to give up her dining room table, or say I didn't need a dining room table. That match wouldn't be made and we couldn't have that transaction go through. What money and economics and understanding how that works is that gives us that filler, right? Regardless, now I may say, hey, Sue, I want to buy your dining room table for $50. And Sue's like, well, that's a $500 table. There's no way, right? So Sue has a different value of what that table is in terms of money in her mind than I do, but we both agree that $50 is $50. Does that make sense? I just want to give some little insight as to how I came to this, this theater, because most people don't really have a very good understanding of money, and their relationship with money is very terrible. And so they have a lot of misconceptions and myths about how money works and what it is and all these kind of things, right? Like from my own personal experience, my mother, believes that money is the root of all evil. The reason why she went through a lot of the issues she had in her life is because she was poor and the people she fought against had a lot of money, right? And the funny thing is the original saying is money is not the root of all evil. It is for the love of money is the root of all evil. Completely different thing, right? And so anyway, so each of these have what I call penultimate outcomes. A penultimate outcome is basically these three outcomes for each of these theaters are going to be rolled up into one giant ultimate outcome. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right. Now, again, this is nice, but this is too broad for me. So now, by the way, just to be very clear here, you do not have to follow my way of doing it. What I want you to focus on is the concept of chunking and breaking things down. You come up with your own areas of responsibility, your own theaters of life. I recommend breaking it into 3 because it tends to be easier to do and easier to remember. But if you want to break it into 5 theaters of life or 9, like I actually have 9 areas of responsibility. So each of these theaters, I actually broke down into smaller components. Okay. So in this internal theater of life, I have these 3 areas of responsibility. In this theater of life, I have these 3 areas of responsibility. Okay, does this make sense to you?
Yeah.
Are there any questions up to this point?
Makes complete sense.
Right? So emotional well-being deals with your emotional state. Mental well-being deals with your cognitive ability. Physical well-being deals with your physical, but it's all of the self. Creative expression deals with the way I dress, the beanie I'm wearing, the way I talk, the way I express myself creatively to the rest of the world, to include my reels, my posts, my character content, right? My connection posts. All these things are about creative expression. My relationships seems pretty self-explanatory. And then my philanthropic endeavors, right? I believe the greatest superpower of humanity is our ability to take notes and pass it on to our peers and our ancestors. And so once you get to a certain point in your life, you've learned enough where you're getting by, you're doing okay, you're at where you want to be. We continue to grow, but now we want to give back. And from a balance standpoint and a nature standpoint, when you think about nature and you think about an ecosystem, right? When a part of that ecosystem, say an animal in that ecosystem doesn't contribute back to the ecosystem as a whole, what happens to that animal or that plant? It goes the way of the dodo. It becomes extinct. It's no longer useful, so it doesn't exist. And that's what this philanthropy section kind of covers, right? And finance, investing, and business. All right. Now, one thing I want you to pay kind of attention here. This is I put thought into this, right? So when I look up here, the reason why internal is on the bottom is because this is the foundational piece. Doesn't matter how good you are in the external, in the economic, if you don't have your internal taken care of it, none of this matters, does it? I could have $300 million, but if I'm 500 pounds at 35 years old, am I really wealthy? Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay. And so, there is a syntax to all this. Emotional well-being is first, mental well-being is second, physical well-being is first or third. Why? Because you cannot be in peak mental state if you're not emotionally ready to be in the peak mental state. You cannot be in peak physical state if you are not emotionally and mentally in the proper states to be at your peak physical state. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You cannot, your relationships will not flourish until you are comfortable with who you are and the way you creatively express yourself in the world. Your relationship, your philanthropy will not have the impact you want until those relationships are fleshed out to the level you want them to be, which can only happen when you have the right configuration of your creative expression. Fair enough?
Yes.
You cannot run a successful business and grow it unless you understand how investing works. And I fundamentally believe that because part of your business is to grow it. And if you ever want to take it public, become an IPO, then you need to understand how investing works so that you don't mess up your business. But you don't necessarily, now, by the way, this can also be from a do standpoint or a learn standpoint, right? You might want to learn about investing before you jump into business and learn about business. But this is all hierarchical as well. You can't be good at investing unless you understand finance. You can't be good at business unless you understand investing. I truly believe that, by the way. And so there might be some disagreement there. That could be a debate for some other day, but I want you to understand why this is the way it is. So when you're starting out in life, if you're a youngin', like Jennifer, you're not really young. If you were 10 years younger, I would tell you, hey, listen, start out here in emotional well-being, master this first, and then master your creative expression, and then master financial literacy. When you get good at those, now you have a solid base. That wheel is round. You're going to go for a smooth ride, and then you can work your way around. And by the way, you can see that spiral, right? When we talked about earlier, the elevating staircase, that spiral staircase that goes up, this kind of follows that same pattern. Okay. Each one of these areas of responsibility has an optimal outcome. These 3 optimal outcomes roll up into, right, the penultimate outcome for economic. And then it rolls up into an ultimate outcome. Do you see how that all works? So you're not recreating the wheel, you're just doing one piece, but then we're adding the pieces together so that they create something greater, right? The sum of its part is greater than its individual pieces. We're following that particular model there, okay?
Mhm.
Or that,
I have a
that might even be.
question.
Sure, please.
I don't know what this word means.
Which one?
PEN, go back, go down.
Oh, penultimate.
Yeah, what is that?
Okay, so if ultimate is first place, penultimate is second place.
Okay, okay.
By the way, that's true on anything that you see this prefix pen on. If it precedes a word like ultimate, it usually means it's the second of something.
Okay, okay.
Right? Okay, so okay, so now here's the thing. So now and Jennifer will recognize this. So in Tony's time of your life, he recommends doing something. He calls them categories of improvement. I call them areas of responsibility. This is the military coming into me, right? An area of responsibility is an AOR. So within that theater, so for example, theater of life is a large swath. So in the Middle Eastern theater, for example, right? There would be areas of responsibility, the Iraqi area of responsibility, the Iranian area of responsibility, the Jordanian area of responsibility. Do you see how that works? So you have a theater, and within the theater, you have smaller areas of responsibility. All right. So now in Tony's time of your life, and what I teach is in each one of these areas, you want to have what are called, he calls them 3 to thrive. I call them apex outcomes. So in any large complex system or subject or topic, there are usually certain areas within the topic that are of more importance than others. And so I broke down these 3 areas of responsibility even smaller into what are called apex outcomes. Okay. So these outcomes lead up into the optimal outcome. But what I want you to notice is see how each one of these pillars support the apex outcome or the optimal outcome. So here I have creative expression, for example, is one of my outcomes. Do you see that right there? This outcome right here?
Yes.
Within this area of responsibility, creative expression, I have these 3 pillars that support it, or 3 to thrive, Jennifer, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Is this making sense to everybody so far?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. So in this area of creative expression,
Yeah.
for me personally, I focus on language, art, and technology. I just have cutesy names for them.
Mhm.
Okay. So, all right. Now, this is where it gets fun. So now each one of these pillars, we have goals associated with them. So when it comes to language, I have certain goals. And the reason why these are all different sizes is because we have different size goals in life. Is that fair? Like this would be an annual goal. This would be a quarterly goal. This might be a monthly goal, and this could be a weekly result. Or this is a 10-year goal. This is a 3-year goal, a 1-year goal, a quarterly goal. Does that make sense? That's what these are supposed to represent. Okay. So these goals feed up into these pillars feed up into these areas of responsibilities, and it goes up the chain. All right. And these goals can all be broken down into tasks. And these tasks are what we do and what we call work on a daily basis. Does this make sense?
Oh my
Completely,
God, that is
yes.
so cool.
All right. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
Wow, that
right,
is so
so-
cool.
so what's cool about it, right? And this right here, this work we do, it can be broken down. And I actually go into this in my little time management. We talk about different contexts, different priorities, okay, different things when it relates to tasks and the decision-making criteria to decide on what to work on at the present moment. Especially now, because one of the things that we don't talk about is it's very difficult. So for some of us old heads in this group, right, have been around for a while, you'd go to work and work was predefined for you. You went in, it was like, here's your standard operating procedures, here's your checklist. You know, this is what you need to do. Make sure you do this. And if you do it all, if you're all done, don't sit, right? Don't get on your phone. There are certain things that you can't do while you're working, but everything else goes there. And we didn't have to make up our mind about what to do next. We didn't prioritize that stuff. But in the current era, especially with us, like our particular group, especially, we're required to make our own schedules. right? We have to prioritize our own shit, our own stuff. And so having checklists in place that help you to do that and have you organized your goals and your tasks and your outcomes that you're trying to reach, having a way to do that for yourself that works for yourself is very nice. It gets rid of a lot of the fuzziness, that lack of clarity, because now I don't have to worry about, should I do this first? If I just follow my checklist on how to do my prioritization, I can trust in myself and my system that I'm going to be working on the most important, most urgent thing that needs to be done right now. And then the next most important, but not urgent thing. And I can just have that task list go down. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Now we're going to get over here where we're going to start doing what I call previews. Okay. So all of this is great. This is all conceptually, it makes sense. And I think it's cool, but how do you practically apply this? This is all theory. How do we do it on a day-to-day? Okay.
Right.
So the way you do this on a day-to-day is we have what I call previews, and they are right here. Okay. And so these are capitalized for a reason. The P for preview means we're going to do a preview. We're going to look forward into the future, or sorry, maybe it's this way for you guys on my camera, forward into the future. But we're also going to do a review because we want to look at the past and learn from it.
Mhm.
So together they form a preview. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. All
How
right.
clever.
So here's what we're going to do. So I have an annual preview. Every year I go through and I look at my year and I say, okay, I have an annual preview here and I have an annual report. And this report informs me about how I did in the past and how I'm going to do in the future. All right. Now these annual reports, I do what are called quadrimestral reviews. They're 4-month reviews, not 3-month, because I like having 4 or 3 4-month sections. But for the sake of speaking the same language and being in line with the most other people, we're going to call them quarterly previews for this training. Okay. Does that make sense? So
Mhm.
quarterly is these 3 months. And you can see January, February, March. All right. Boom. These reports. These quarterly previews go down to monthly previews, go down to weekly, go down to daily. These all make sense, right? Do you
Yes.
understand these?
Mhm.
Each one of these previews will give me a report that feed up into these other reports. You're going to see how this works in a real world situation when I go through my planning process. But again, I want to make sure we're all enrolled. Now, the daily preview is broken down into 2. And Jennifer, you'll love this because this looks familiar to you, right?
Yep.
My daily preview is broken up into a morning preview and an evening preview, otherwise known as a morning routine or a morning ritual and an evening routine or an evening ritual. Okay. What we're going to do today is this morning preview. This is what I'm going to show you from a practical standpoint. Fair enough? All right. I'm going to stop the share. Did that make sense?
Yes.
From a conceptual standpoint?
I'm totally taking notes. Yes, it makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, hey, listen, I'm gonna actually stop this recording because I'm gonna make